It's Monday morning at your practice. You log in, and right away, you're staring at 32 pending ADHD stimulant prior authorizations. 5 new patient starts are stalled, waiting on payer approval. Roughly 1 in 9 U.S. children, about 7.1 million, now have an ADHD diagnosis. That volume continues to expand into adulthood. Another 15.5 million adults currently have a diagnosis, and roughly half of them did not receive that diagnosis until they reached adulthood. And stimulant prescribing across all age groups, specifically accelerating around 2020. Payers have responded to that acceleration. Today, nearly every commercial, Medicare Advantage, and Medicaid plan requires prior authorization for ADHD stimulant medications. Almost every Vyvanse or Adderall order you write has a high probability of getting flagged. This collision between rising clinical volume and tightening administrative friction creates a persistent bottleneck. Every new prescription now carries a guaranteed administrative wait that pulls staff away from patient care. The American Medical Association's 2024 Prior Authorization Physician Survey measured exactly what this administrative burden looks like. They found that practices complete an average of 39 prior authorization requests per physician every week. That volume demands roughly 13 hours of physician and staff time per week. For a small practice, you're essentially paying for a full-time employee just to process paperwork. This chart shows exactly where that manual effort fails. 31% of those manual requests are denied on the first submission. Yet when practices appeal, 81.7% of those denials are fully or partially overturned. The care is medically necessary. The initial documentation was simply missing a required field. The margin for error on that documentation just got much tighter. The CMS 0057-F regulation took effect in 2026, forcing many plans to issue a decision within 7 calendar days, or 72 hours for an expedited request. But those tight deadlines have a catch. If a payer requests more information because a submission is incomplete, the clock resets entirely. When you layer these strict decision windows on top of a 13-hour weekly burden, the manual approach becomes mathematically unsustainable. Without a disciplined process, you're simply receiving denials faster. ADHD stimulant prior authorizations are uniquely complex. You cannot hand them off to a general front office workflow because every drug in this class carries its own specific, highly detailed documentation requirements. Look at the required clinical scorecard, DSM-5-TR diagnostic criteria, precise prior trial logs, and AHA cardiac screening notes. Then add step therapy. Preferred drug lists rotate quarterly. A path that secured Vyvanse approval 3 months ago might automatically trigger a denial today. When that denial happens, it usually triggers a peer-to-peer call. 85% of them fail because prescribers walk into them unprepared. They jump on the phone between appointments without the specific trial logs or cardiac screening evidence the reviewer demands. Most peer-to-peer denials hold up. The reviewers aren't proving the care is inappropriate, they are simply upholding the denial because the prescriber doesn't have the required documentation right there on the call. Faced with this bottleneck, the standard reflex for most practices is straightforward. Hire a general front office staff member whose only job is to handle prior authorizations. This chart outlines what happens next. It's called the staffing spiral. The sheer volume of PA requests quickly outpaces what one person can handle. The staff member burns out and leaves, turning the entire backlog right back over to the physicians. Replacing that person triggers a massive training gap. It takes weeks for a new hire to learn the various payer portals, let alone the stimulant-specific documentation rules for every plan. During that learning curve, submissions go out with missing forms or incomplete therapy logs. The payer pauses the request, staff spend days chasing chart notes, and the patient is left waiting. Manual in-house staffing for ADHD prior authorizations is a financial and operational trap. It prevents busy practices from scaling effectively. There is a practical alternative to the staffing spiral. A growing number of practices are solving this by outsourcing to a specialized AAPC-credentialed team that operates directly inside their EMR, supported by AI-augmented workflows. This graphic shows how that augmented workflow operates in practice. An AI layer, like AWS Bedrock, reads the patient chart. It instantly pulls the prior trial logs, DSM-5-TR data, and cardiac notes, matching them against current payer policies to draft a complete medical necessity narrative. It operates on a strict human-in-the-loop model. The AI handles 80% of the manual keystrokes, but an AAPC specialist steps in for the final 20%, applying clinical judgment and reviewing everything thoroughly before submission. Behind the scenes, orchestration tools like N8N and voice agents powered by Clog 4.5 handle the repetitive payer status calls and portal routing. By removing those manual delays, the standard turnaround time drops to just 4 hours. If a peer-to-peer call is required, the specialist team provides a brief 30 minutes before you pick up the phone. You get a clean summary of the exact AACAP evidence and trial timelines the reviewer will ask for, converting those denials into approvals. You stop managing an unpredictable daily administrative headache and replace it with a highly predictable, tech-enabled clinical service operation. The financial argument comes down to straightforward math. Once you factor in salary, benefits, training, and turnover, an in-house prior authorization coordinator costs a practice between $55,000 and $84,000 every single year. This chart compares that directly against the outsourced model. Services like Staffingly run approximately $20,000 a year for a single position tier. That operates at a fraction of the fully loaded in-house expense. To achieve that efficiency, you have to grant a specialized vendor access to your EMR system. Specialized partners manage this securely through encrypted VPNs with full audit trails, and they sign comprehensive business associate agreements before touching a single chart. The ultimate return on investment is time. You reclaim those 13 clinical hours per week, and you permanently remove your practice from the endless cycle of staff training and turnover. Look at your current pending queue and calculate the hours your team spent on it this week. The path forward depends on whether that manual math still works for your practice. Stop letting administrative red tape dictate your patient care. Evaluate the data, run your own cost analysis, and consider piloting an AI-augmented workflow. Fail.